The podcast you're about to listen to may contain random lines from musical theater, terrible attempts at regional accents, and a sincere discussion about mental health. You have been warned. Are you ready to start singing with your feet? Formidable! Allez, c'est parti! Non, nous ne sommes pas fous, nous ne sommes pas ivres, nous sommes juste dans la joie. Une joie profonde, nos cœurs elle inonde. Cette joie, elle vient du ciel. Non, nous ne sommes pas fous.
Welcome to Sing With Your Feet, the podcast in which we pursue our ideal lives every day, little by little, and celebrate those little things as golden stepping stones towards our dreams. The podcast in which we get acquainted with joy as we try to live in harmony with the planet in simple, creative, and life-bringing ways. The podcast in which your wicked stepsister, death doula LiElla Kelly, gives us the lowdown on environmentally friendly burial options, or as she likes to call it, going out green. My name is Lily Fields, and I'm going to be your fairy godmother for the next half hour or so. And as I mentioned, your favorite death doula is back with us this week, and I could not be more excited to hear what she has to say. I missed you, LiElla. Nah, Lily Fields. Oh, that? That's you. You sometimes object to the things I have to say, and I needed to find a way to make you sound different from me. So there you have it. You're a Southern belle. Isn't that sweet? Now, Lily, are you going to try to convince me that recycling will bring me joy? Because I am telling you up front, this is not going to be the case. Darling, I would never try to convince you that something is going to bring you joy. Because what will bring me joy won't necessarily bring you joy, and vice versa. What I know is that environment and ecology, which is incidentally the topic of this week's episode, it's not about recycling. There are so many different ways to look at the environment and ecology, and a ton of important things that can be said about it, about people who are far more intelligent than I am. I'm not going to suggest that you should live off the grid, although a few weeks ago I did tell you that you should stop shopping, so I guess I understand why you might be worried about that. And I'm not going to tell you to start growing tomatoes hydroponically in your bathroom, although if this gets you excited, then hey, by all means, do it. What I want to get you thinking about today is how you can find a way to live out your ideal life in relationship to the environment, and how you can seek joy in this area of your life. Because joy is what is going to make any commitment or any sacrifice more bearable. It's in many ways going back to what we talked about in episode 27, which is called Passionately Curious. It's about using what geeks us out and overlaying that with our concerns for the planet in which we live. Lily Fields, that sounds like crazy talk. Well, it does right now, but that's because I've barely gotten started. Stick with me, darling. We've got some magic to make. We are getting towards the end of our series on the ideal life themes. This week, we are going to examine our ideal life as it pertains to environment and ecology. And next week, we're going to talk about craft and creativity, which you'll see is my absolute favorite topic of them all. Since the beginning of September, we've looked at the topics of marriage, commitments, contentment, and mental health. Before that, we talked about passions, our bodies and our health, work, personal style, spiritual life, and way more. Each of these topics is one individual aspect of our lives. How your ideal life is defined in any one of these areas is unique to you, with your dreams, your life experiences, and the time, talent, and treasure that you have to invest in them. There is no one-size-fits-all off-the-rack ideal life. There is only an haute couture tailored perfectly to you life, in colors that flatter you and make you feel like $1,000,000. That's your ideal life. The whole of the conversation and the premise I have been trying to put forward is about how joy can be found in the pursuit of the overlap of these themes. Once we have defined what our ideal life would look like, and we do that by spending some time answering the prompt, in my ideal life, I am a person who, and letting our hearts and imaginations run wild, it gives us a blueprint for our decision making. It gives us direction. It helps us decline opportunities and invitations that do not help us make progress. Knowing what we want for our lives helps us get unstuck. Along the way, we have challenged ourselves to ask 4 little questions every day about our ideal life, looking each day at just one of the themes. We do this because progress towards the life we dream of is our goal. There's this super annoying businessy adage that says, we manage what we measure. It's super annoying, yes, but I'm sure that we can agree that there are many examples in our own lives of how this is true. Well, the goal of asking ourselves these 4 questions is to measure, or to take the temperature of what is working and what isn't working, to identify one tiny thing that we can do today to make progress. I, as your fairy godmother, am fond of celebrating progress. Celebrations of any kind are welcome. Cheap, expensive, private, public. All I care about is that when you make progress, no matter how small, that you take a moment to recognize that you just got closer to living your ideal life. And I mean, no matter how small that progress is. Case in point. Last week, I used my birthday as an excuse to thank past me for making my life easier. This was important because, let me tell you, since school started back up in the fall, I have been deep in the throes of forgetfulness. I was losing things again. My keys, my phone, my clothes, my library card, my mind. I gave myself a pep talk. I recommitted to giving items dedicated homes and actually putting them there. And even saying out loud, I'm putting my keys in the key basket and I'm putting my phone in the front pocket of my backpack. At the overlap of the circles of habits and routines, mental health and commitments was the joy of celebrating a solution. It was a tiny thing. I bought myself a cookie at the bakery and I ate it in glorious, triumphant solitude. It's not something I do often, but it brought me immense joy to celebrate this little tiny bit of progress. Sometimes it's the little tiny things that trip us up in our everyday lives. For me, it was keys and a library card. And that's why celebrating little things is so important. And sometimes we need a pep talk to move us forward. You alone know what it will take to motivate you. I want you to love yourself enough to celebrate your progress. Seek out joy, Cinderella, and you'll live a life of magic. The ideal life theme of environment and ecology means being a good steward of the space and resources that have been accorded to us, including, but not limited to, the planet we live in, the air we breathe, and the natural resources at our disposal. This theme, as they all are, is idiosyncratic, and it means to you what it means to you, just like it means to me what it means to me. For me, it covers everything from taking care of my plants and my little balcony garden, to how our family uses water, electricity, and gas, and considering how much trash we've been taking out in relationship to our recycling. It's also about, and forgive me for saying something completely crazy, but it will make more sense next week. It means learning how to make something out of nothing. I know that my family's teeny tiny little efforts in this area won't save the planet, but it is important to me that we don't lose sight of the low-hanging fruit in this area. So, in my ideal life, I am a person who takes good care of my plants, reuses everything I possibly can, recycles everything that can be recycled, uses creativity to keep stuff out of the dump. In my ideal life, I am a person who doesn't buy anything with unnecessary packaging, who lives as close to zero waste as I can, is conscientious about the origin of what I eat and what I wear. I'm a person who reduces my carbon footprint. I am a person who can make something out of nothing. And I am a person who keeps on top of our recycling. In my ideal life, I am a person who teaches my kids to respect nature. Part 2, Green Parenting. When I was pregnant with my first baby, I had all kinds of hopeful thoughts. I wanted only wood toys for the baby and none of that plastic stuff. I wanted to use cloth diapers for the baby, none of those landfill clogging disposable ones. I would make my own baby food. I wanted my child to grow up taking walks in the woods and knowing the name of every indigenous species of plant and the scientific name for every animal we came across. I rejected the thought of a baby monitor. I did not want a baby swing or a fancy crib or baby furniture. Actually, in the end, I managed to stay away from those. But the pressure to be a doting parent is intense. How we prepare for the arrival of a baby is heavily influenced by what companies want to sell us, not by what we actually need. To the point that we are already made to doubt our affection for and our dedication to our child before they're ever born if we don't go along with the marketing ploys of modern convenience. Before that first scalawag was born, I found myself a copy of the sheet music for the song Nature Boy. You know, the one that was made popular in Moulin Rouge as it was sung by David Bowie. There was a boy, a very strange, enchanted boy. They say he wandered very far, over land and sea. I love that song. At the time, I hadn't started articulating my ideal life. These were ideas, thoughts. I wanted a nature boy. It was my aspiration. I had a zero action plan to make it a reality, and I was missing a lot of information about how this all would go down. There is a difference between what we call in French faire des plans sur la comète, which literally means making plans on a comet, but just means dreaming big without being anchored in reality. There's a difference between that and pursuing our ideal life. One incredibly important initial criteria for an ideal life statement is that it is about the person I want to be in my ideal life, meaning I cannot impose my ideal life on anyone else. I can dream about an ideal life devoid of plastic toys that make noise and without disposable diapers, but I am not the only person raising my child. And neither my child's indulgent father nor I are in control of what that child eventually likes or dislikes or is allergic to, no more than we can control his character, his passions, or his interests. So, nearly immediately upon my child coming into this world, I saw my dream of raising a kind of civilized Tarzan was a bit foolish. I stayed pretty solidly stuck and stubborn about some of those things for a while. I tried to do the cloth diaper thing and the daily walks in the woods with a baby in a baby sling. But you know what? My baby cried all the time. Nothing. Absolutely nothing would calm him down except for two things. The sound of the crinkling plastic packaging that came around a bunch of bananas, or the sound of the vacuum cleaner. Oh, the cloth diapers were great, but my husband was not on board, and I'll admit that they were a little bit complicated. And then we started getting baby gifts. Toys with batteries, and plastic things with lights and sound, the exact kinds of things I had so carefully hoped to avoid. But the lights and sounds were intriguing to him, and they stopped him from scream crying. So then what? It made me miserable to see that this Pollyanna dream I had of being a happy, earthy, crunchy, hippie, green parent to nature boy was already coming apart at the seams. So I had to regroup. As is wont to happen, my baby started to grow. I saw that I had been very short-sighted, and that I could in no way control him or my indulgent husband, or the fact that I was pregnant again after 6 months. So I needed to figure out on my own my relationship with being green and hold myself accountable to it. I had to start small. Very, very small. For example, one thing was that even though we live in an apartment, I wanted to be able to compost our vegetable scraps. I was still making baby food at the time, and this seemed like a good way to create a no-waste solution. So I bought a balcony composter that is home to little earthworms who eat our veggie scraps. We got this multi-layered composter 7 years ago, and those worms still devour our veggie scraps, much to my delight and to the delight of my children, whose job it is to feed the worms by taking out our scraps and spreading them in the composter. The benefit of this process is that the worms turn the scraps into this beautiful brown soil that I can then use in my garden planters in the spring. No, I can't have a hydroponics garden and grow all my own vegetables, but I can have a circular system for some of our food waste. And the best part is that my boys think that this is perfectly normal. It's not entirely no waste, but it significantly reduces our trash output. And I want less stuff from my family to go into the landfills. So, yay, success. Another very, very important element to me in regards to my children has been that we wear out, and I mean until unusable, every single item of clothing. This means that when an item has a hole in it, we repair it. If it is too small, we either pass it on to a smaller child if it's in good enough condition, or, and here is where you are going to start thinking I'm crazy, but I have been known to lop off the sleeves of a particularly well-loved long-sleeve t-shirt that have gotten too short, if the rest of the t-shirt still fits, or I have added a few inches of fabric to the bottom of a t-shirt to make it longer, to make it last longer. I have mended the knees of some of their pants so many times that they are exquisite works of art. And once those clothes wear out beyond repair, I cut them up and I use them as rags, or I use them as patches on other items of clothing. And the best part about this is my children think that this is perfectly normal. They are totally cool with wearing mended, patched clothes. As a matter of fact, they call the patches that I sew inside the knees of their pants secrets. They think that this makes them unique and cool. Like I said, if they outgrow something and it is in a good condition, we do pass it on to my friends if they have boys. But they have a limited wardrobe, and they're happy with that. And that makes me happy too. When I was growing up, I had a neighbor who was a retired doctor. This man was the most frugal, careful man I've ever known. His catchphrase was waste not, want not. He wore gardening boots that were held together with duct tape, and he wore every day a threadbare apron. To look at him, you would have thought he was in the grips of poverty. But all of us who knew him knew otherwise. This was who he was, and we loved him for his eccentricity. Do I ever worry that people are judging us for how ragged a merry band we are? Yeah, sometimes. But the only people whose opinion of us matters to me are the people who know that we're eccentric and not confined to the norms of this world. We live in a bubble of fairy dust. Or, as I've talked about before, I got a bee in my bonnet to learn everything I could about wool. From the shearing of the animals to the use of the spinning wheel, this became something of a family project, with my youngest helping me wash the wool fresh off the sheep, and my eldest carefully carding the wool. They have both shown varying degrees of interest in learning how to knit. Incidentally, some of the wool we've deemed unusable due to its condition. There was too much vegetable matter, or it was too matted to card, and the boys have used it to help me enrich the soil in our garden planters. Nothing goes to waste. Waste not, want not. Plus, the boys continue to have a relationship with the animals our wool comes from and the people who care for those animals. This gives them a sense of familiarity with an agricultural lifestyle that, as city dwellers, and as much as we would like to, we cannot provide for them. They have a vocabulary for life experiences that many city kids can't have because they simply don't have exposure to it. The boys have become knowledgeable about these ancient fiber arts with which, who knows, when Armageddon comes or the global supply chain is permanently disrupted, they will be able to clothe themselves and others. I love that they understand the life cycle of a garment, and it gives them insight into its true value. I will admit that all of this is time-consuming, but it's a choice. It brings me joy because it is at the overlap of the circles of environment, parenting, and passions and creativity in the Venn diagram of my life. My kids throw around the word wasteful with abandon. They share their father's aversion to cigarettes, and they have actually warned people to be careful what they do with the cigarette butts because they don't want to see the forests go up in flames. My kids know the difference between knits and wovens. None of these were on my green parenting bingo card when I was pregnant with my first child. But I'm really happy with the results. It all started with figuring out lucidly who I want to be in my ideal life in relationship to the environment. And from there, it was about making the choices that would get me there. It was about taking my passions and the things that geek me out and intentionally investing my time, talent, and treasures in the way I parent my kids. Nothing is perfect. I mean, we drive our car more than I would like, and we still have more plastic toys than I would like to count. I know that there is progress to be made towards keeping a tiny carbon footprint, but I'm still going to celebrate our tiny victories and the unexpected ways that they bring us joy.
Elle me fait bondir et vibrer, crier. Elle me donne envie de chanter, danser. Elle pousse à agir, donner, partager. Et tout simplement de sourire, aimer.
It's part 3, The Wicked Stepsister. You have heard enough from me on this subject. I know that the person you've been dying to hear from the moment I started talking to this microphone today is LiElla Kelly. She is, in this fairy tale, your wicked stepsister. Not wicked because she's mean, mind you, but wicked because she talks about things that most of us would rather not think about, but that we should be thinking about. Things like death. If I've said it once, I've said it a dozen times. It is not dark or morbid to think about what we want our loved ones to remember about us when we're gone. As a matter of fact, pursuing that train of thought can help us articulate our ideal life. Death is inseparable from life. It is the period at the end of the sentence. So becoming comfortable with the eventuality of our own death can help us live more fully. If this isn't a topic that puts you at ease, then you need to meet LiElla. She is the very best person to get you thinking. With all that fanfare out of the way, I am so happy to welcome back LiElla Kelly to the show. LiElla, the floor is yours.
Every other week in the town that I live in, families engage in a ritual. They sort their garbage into bins: plastics, paper, cardboard, glass. Then they set their little blue recycling bins on the curb for pickup. Where we live, recycling isn't mandatory. It's a choice. And even though it's extra work, as you drive around town, you can see that many people are choosing to recycle. It seems that we feel compelled to do our little part to mitigate our environmental impact. As you may be aware, I am the wicked stepsister to Lily's fairy godmother. And my special brand of wickedness is an ability to find the death slant in just about any topic. So I'm back to share the death slant of going green. So let's investigate the options that we have available. First, let's take a look at the most common disposition choices in our culture. A little side note, if you're not familiar with that term disposition, it refers to what we do with dead bodies. In our culture, the most common disposition choices are burial and cremation. We're going to discuss those processes and the resulting environmental impact. We'll start with burial. Here's how it works. Many families choose to have a viewing before the funeral. Generally, funeral homes require that a body is embalmed for a viewing to take place. Even without a viewing, some funeral homes will embalm a body unless otherwise requested by the next of kin. Embalming involves the use of formaldehyde-based fluids. About 800,000 gallons of embalming fluid are buried in U.S. cemeteries every year. We don't yet have definitive information on the environmental impact of those chemicals, but we do know that embalmers who regularly work with these chemicals have increased risk of certain cancers and neurological diseases. Okay, so after a body is embalmed, it is placed in a casket. Caskets represent the one-time use of resources such as wood, steel, copper, and bronze. At the time of burial, the casket is placed in the ground in a concrete vault, kind of like a Russian nesting doll, a box inside a box. The concrete vault helps to preserve the aesthetics of the cemetery. It keeps the ground from settling under the weight of heavy equipment used in the cemetery or just the passage of time and the settling of the earth. The burial plot is now claimed for perpetuity. For years to come, resources will be needed to maintain the gravesite and cemetery lawns. Fertilizers and pesticides may also be employed to beautify the cemetery. That's the basic burial practice. What about cremation? More than half of Americans are choosing to be cremated. In the U.S., over 2 million cremations are performed each year. How does this process work? It's quite straightforward. A body is placed in a container, anything from a cardboard box to a fancy casket, and placed into the retort or cremation chamber. The body is exposed to extreme temperatures, 1400 to 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, for 2 to 4 hours. During the process, harmful gases like mercury and dioxin are released. Additionally, about 540 pounds of carbon dioxide are released from each cremated body. In the U.S., that's over 1 billion pounds of CO2 each year. CO2 is the gas that traps heat in the atmosphere, which contributes to an increase in atmospheric temperature, otherwise known as global warming. Like I said, burial and cremation are currently the most popular options, but they aren't the only choices we have available. There are greener alternatives. We'll take a look at 3 of these. First, green burial. Green burial is similar to traditional burial, but it does have a couple of rules. First off, no embalming. Only biodegradable materials may be used in the burial. A body can be shrouded in natural fabrics and placed in the earth, just without a casket, or a casket of untreated wood can be used. Just a simple casket, basically. When the grave is closed, native plants can be used to beautify the site. Some conventional cemeteries are making green burial available. These cemeteries are called hybrid cemeteries. They offer the essential aspects of green burial either throughout the cemetery or in a designated section of the cemetery. Natural cemeteries are also popping up around the U.S. These offer burial in a natural setting like a forest or a prairie. Another option is conservation cemeteries, which are natural burial grounds on lands that are protected by a conservation land trust. You can learn more about these options by visiting greenburialcouncil.org. Our second alternative is alkaline hydrolysis or flameless cremation. This process is really an appealing option for those who like the overall idea of cremation but want a gentler process or a lower carbon footprint. Here's how it works. An alkaline hydrolysis machine is made up of a single chamber that is air and watertight, which holds approximately 100 gallons of liquid. A body is placed in the chamber with a solution that is 95% water and 5% alkaline chemicals, either potassium hydroxide or sodium hydroxide. Depending on the equipment, heat, pressure, or agitation may be introduced to convert soft tissues into basic organic compounds. The entire process will take from 3 to 16 hours. Again, this depends on the equipment and the mass of the body. The end result will be bone fragments and sterile liquid. The bone fragments will be dried and pulverized in the same manner as traditional cremains. However, one interesting difference is that alkaline hydrolysis results in approximately 32% more cremated remains than a flame or traditional cremation would. And what about the water? The liquid that is left over after this process is far cleaner than most wastewater, so it can flow into the local wastewater system, or it may be used for fertilizer because of the potassium and sodium content. Currently, alkaline hydrolysis is legal in 20 states, but that is changing rapidly with more and more states adding legislation to allow the process. Our third and last alternative option is human composting, otherwise known as natural organic reduction. And it is what it sounds like, composting. So you already get the basic idea, just applying composting principles to human remains. But before you start imagining veggie scraps and body parts in the corner of the yard, I assure you it is a bit more sophisticated than that. A body is placed in a vessel with plant material like wood chips, alfalfa, and straw. The container will be closed and will remain closed and monitored, occasionally rotated, for 30 days. During that time, microbes will convert the enclosed contents into nutrient-rich soil. The soil can be donated to conservation projects, or it could be used to enrich landscaping projects. Currently, natural organic reduction is available in Washington, Oregon, Colorado, and Vermont, with more states working on legislation. It's quite possible that all of these options are not yet available in the state in which you live. Even so, we all have choices for greener death practices. Investigate the options that are available in your area. Ask questions. Check with multiple providers. This, of course, means having conversations, but that's okay because talking about death won't kill you. I promise.
Oh, yeah, I missed you, LiElla. Thank you so much. LiElla is a death doula based in Montana. A link to her website is in the show notes, but I also encourage you to look up her podcast. It's called Death Becomes Her. It's a fascinating look at some very serious topics. Find Death Becomes Her on all the podcast platforms. The Ideal Life Exercise. As we do with each one of these themes, I ask myself 4 easy questions about the theme that we're covering. This is an exercise I do every morning about just one topic each day. So this week, we're going to ask those 4 questions about environment and ecology. Number 1, what is working? Since school started this year, I cannot count the number of times that I have reminded my prolific artist scalawags that paper is not an eternal resource. But we got really lucky, and a friend gave me a bunch of scrap paper, and my little boys have been really, really happy and cutting them up and using them for all different ways. I really feel like I am winning at being an earth-loving mama this week on that. I also count it as a win when one of the scalawags says, "Oops, I forgot to turn off the light." And just as much as when I see one of the geranium cuttings that I've been nurturing start to grow roots, or I remember to save the pasta water to give to the plants. Oh, or I've been using vintage bed sheets in an attempt to make furoshiki gift wrapping. It makes me feel like I'm doing something cool for the environment too. So I've got a lot of things to celebrate this week. Question number 2. What isn't working? This question is usually more aligned to how much we've been driving the car or how much trash we've been throwing out. If either of those elements seems out of proportion to the lifestyle we try to maintain, it's time to look at why. I've been driving the car a lot lately. Question number 3. What do I need to think about? Well, I am always finding an article here or there that will prick my interest regarding how to reduce our electricity consumption or more zero-waste options for groceries. So something that I might need to think about would be how can I make that work for my family in a way that will bring us joy? And question number 4, what can I do today to get me closer to my ideal life? Well, one thing that I do every time I answer this topic is I water my orchids. I water them every 3 weeks, but they bloom for me every year. I also check on my plants, and I take the glass to the recycling center. Those are little tiny things I can do today to make progress towards my ideal life. All right, well, maybe you aren't ready to live off the grid yet, and that's just fine. But I want you to consider how you can reduce your environmental footprint in a way that's unique to you, that brings you joy, and maybe even geeks you out. Let me suggest that you start by imagining how your ideal life interacts with the environment and who you would need to be in order to pursue that ideal life. Then, think about how the different circles of your life overlap with the environment. Start small so that it's sustainable, and then go from there. Taking care of our planet should be something that brings us joy, and not just because it's the right thing to do. It's because we were made to take care of the planet. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on your podcatcher, and please, if you enjoy something you've heard here, please share it with someone you think could use a fairy godmother too. You can find playlists on my YouTube channel. That's Lily Fields. A great big thank you to 7 Productions here in Mulhouse, France for the use of the song La Joie as the intro and outro of the program. Also thanks to Matt Kugler who sang it and Claude Egway who wrote it. This is your fairy godmother signing off. Just remember, it's never too late to start singing with your feet.